Okay, so ciao everybody. Today I'm going to show you the EDI framework. Actually, I presented it last year, so this year I want to make a recap and show you what happened in the last year. Before I start, a few words about me, in case you don't know me. I'm Simone Orsi, I'm 40, I'm from Rome, Italy. I'm a full stack dev since a bunch of years, Odoo dev since a bunch of years, OCA board member, and I love open source. And I'm working at Camp to Camp, and you can find me almost everywhere with that funny nickname. Quickly, the agenda for today. So, as I said, I'm going to explain what this framework is and what it's not. As well as I'm going to explain you about the motivation, why I come up with this solution and why I built this framework. The core concepts of it, how it works, more or less. Then a few words regarding the pluggability of the system, which is actually the core of it. And then we go through what's new and what could be the roadmap for the future. So what is it? It's actually a big modular system. The aim is to be able to focus only on configuration and the data. So the framework is basically giving you all the automation that you look for when you have to deal with external systems. Because the reason why I came to this conclusion is that for the, nth time, had to deal with external service, update the state of the internal records, handle the errors, plug another way to handle something in the case, blah, 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 blah. So, and then on top of this, you put all the EDI formats that you can have. So try to find a way to unify these behaviors. So the main motivation is to avoid replicating all the automatism, like read something from outside or send something to outside. So inbound and outbound. And as I mentioned, focus only on the data. So with this framework, you spend much more time, or you can spend more time focusing on what you produce rather than how do I deal with the systems. Another good point is that you have a unified UI. So most of the time, since you develop a specific tool for that customer, for that particular exchange, you end up with all kinds of interface. So maybe for sales, it works in a way, for purchases, it works in a way, for the warehouse, it works in a way, and so forth. So you have to, not only to maintain this, you also have to explain to your customer how it works every time you implement a new version of this thing. So this leads to reducing specific devs for your customer, okay? Because you just focus on what they really need, the data. And last but not least, many of you could object, yeah, but Odoo has already some sort of EDI-like feature since version 14, more or less. First of all, it's not a framework. Once again, they're just overloading the models for doing things. So, for instance, for accounts, everything is in the account move, and just override the model and the methods to take care to customize it. And of course, why not? It can be refactored like while I'm talking, so it's not really reliable in the long term. So, the core concepts. You have a backend type. A backend type is essentially describing the major category, let's say, of the exchange. So it can be UBL, GS1, or any of those formats. Then you have the backend, which is the main entry point for configuring the exchanges. So on a backend, you can configure maybe the web service that you want to use to send out things, or the external storage that you want to use, like SFTP, FTP, whatever, to send or read files from, backend from. And then probably the most important piece is the exchange type, because is what describes how the exchange are made. So On the exchange type, you can say, I want to produce an XML. It has to be UBL. It has to be sent using a web service rather than an SFTP, etc. And it has a YAML advanced settings configuration, whereas you can add your own configuration without having to code too much. Then there is the exchange record, which is basically the record that triggers the exchange itself. So for instance, if you have a sale order, you don't run the machinery on top of the sale order. You have an exchange record, and that represents the real exchange. Core concepts, again, so you have 4 main actions. You want to generate an output, and then you want to send the output. On the contrary, when you're talking about inbound traffic, you want to receive and process. So this system already gives you all the automation related to these 4 main actions, so that what you have to do is just provide components that handle the generate, the send, the receive, and the process. In the case of the send and receive, since they are kind of common, we have already some reusable pieces there. We can maybe look at it later, but so if you have to use a storage like SFTP or FTP, whatever, or even AWS, we plug the storage, in the storage repository in the OCA, there are plenty of modules that allow you to talk to external storages. So this is plugged already, and you can, from the backend, you can say, I want to use this storage or that storage or this web service. And this works automatically both for sending and receiving. And there are some secondary actions which are not mandatory, that are to check the state of a record in case you have an exchange that needs to be updated. Could be, for example, if you're dealing with SFTP, if depending on the contract that you have with your customer, well, with the partner of the customer, you might want to check if the file has been moved or if the file has been reported as invalid, so you have to check the state of this record. And validate is useful to validate the output or the input. So in case an XML you want to validate with XSD, which can be easily done through the configuration of the exchange type, or validate the schema of a CSV. So the workflow, super quickly, is for the output, you get a record which can be either manually or automatically generated, depending on your needs. So then the output is automatically generated because we know that that's an exchange record that goes out. And then again, automatically, this output is sent when it's ready, when the output is generated. In the same fashion, for the input, you can either generate an exchange record before, because maybe you know that you're going to receive something and you want to show the user that you're waiting for something, or it can be generated automatically. So for instance, with the storage, with external storage, we can configure a pattern of files that basically a component is going to look in the external storage and see if a new file with that pattern is there, and then it's going to generate the record automatically. And once you have the record, then again, the file is classified as received and validated, and then is processed if it can be processed. Pluggability, actually this is a very condensed summary of what you can plug, but at the core of this system, we have components. In case you're not familiar, there is the component is a well-known design pattern, and in the OCA we have the component modules that allows you to register, let's say, objects that are called components that are retrieved automatically based on some match patterns and arguments. In this case, you can register components for send, for receive, process, etc. The main actions or also the secondary actions that you've seen before. Which means that you focus only on registering components when you need to customize the behavior of the system, basically, if it's not about UI, of course. Then once you have your component ready to be used or reused, you can use it in your exchange type. And here you see an example on how you can leverage existing components for making your exchange type behave like you want. So you just declare the action, in this case generate and send, and you say, okay, I want to use the component that generates a purchase order, for instance. On top of this, you can inject, imagine that, well, if you develop, you're kind of familiar with a context key that you can set in Odoo everywhere to change the behavior of certain functionalities. So from there, you can also inject context keys. So you can even customize, you can make your logic more flexible in this way without having to add too many conditions here and there. And for the send, as I said, sending and receiving is sending and receiving are quite common, so you can use either the storage or the web service. And we have already web service integration, so you can reuse that right now without coding anything. If you have to send an HTTP request to an endpoint, you just declare that in the exchange type. On top of this, you can pass customization arguments like the method, other options, and then you can, if you want to compose a different URL for this exchange, you can propagate the URL and params to the URL that is used by the web service. And all of this in the exchange type, so no need to code for this. So what's new? Well, during the year we found a few bugs. So, there were many fixes. I cannot name them all, but trust me, there were many fixes. Several UI improvements, especially in the way the views are loaded. So, for instance, we simplified the menu. You have, by default, you filter on the records that you created today, because it's pointless to look after too many records. You can archive the backends, thanks to ForgeFlow, if I'm not wrong. And then another important point is the improvement of the automatic buttons. On the exchange type, you can configure by model if you want to render a button on the records. And you can decide on which condition. So for instance, if an exchange type, I don't know, to send an invoice, has to be made available only when the invoice is sent or whenever you want, okay? Well, the state is done. You can configure the exchange type to display a button in the form, and automatically the system will display this button on the invoice type matching the case, and then you can have a manual action to generate that exchange. A new feature is the autoexec, still by type. So the way the system works by default is that you create exchange records, and then there are crons that, depending on the frequency that you can configure, they go there and look for records that have to be processed, either processed or sent out or generated. With this new flag, basically, you don't wait. So if you want a record to be immediately processed, for instance, or immediately sent out, you can use this flag, and it's going to be processed automatically, still with jobs, but immediately. Then in the EDI storage, which I mentioned before, is the one that plugs in the storage machinery, you can now configure a path via environment. It means that, so normally when you configure a storage, you say, okay, read from this path, and that's it. But we had the use case that for different exchange, even of the same type, we had to use different folders in the remote storage. So now you can do it from the environment. And last but not least, EDI web service, which is the integration of the web service. I improved the integration, and this makes possible the thing that you've seen before, that you can say web service send, and then you can reuse it right away just with configuration. Then we had, so EDI XML was there already on 13, I ported it to 14, and is basically a module that allows you to load, parse, and validate XML. And it's completely integrated in the system, so if you want to validate XML in your exchange type, you can say the action, validate, use EDI XML, and you pass the EXD that you want to use to validate the XML. And automatically it's going to be validated as soon as either you generate or you receive. Then one of the latest is EDI party data. Okay, so when you do an exchange, especially for UBL and GS1, you always need to identify the partners, being the sender, being the receiver, etc. And for doing so, there are other modules that you can use, like a partner identifier, something like that, from partner contact, which allows you to configure, like if this is a GLN, like a global location number, or any kind of possible category of identifiers. And with this module, you can configure which identifiers you want to use for an exchange, and then it's going to generate the metadata that you can reuse in your, maybe in an XML template to generate the data for the partner. So you don't have to care anymore about which identifier you want to use for that particular exchange. And of course, you can set it on the exchange type, because then you can have the full control. A big one is EDI sale. So with this, I integrated everything with a sale order, and you can have inbound and outbound exchanges on the sales. Later, if I have time, I'll show you quickly how it's done. But essentially, with this base module, you can manage any kind of exchange related to sales. EDI sale UBL is, of course, the UBL integration for this module. And here, basically, you have an automatic way to process the UBL files and to generate the UBL files, reusing the same machinery that we have in OCA EDI repository. One thing that I didn't mention is that all the machinery that produce and read and has to deal with the real data is, most of the time, is already there in the EDI repository. So the framework just reuse the pieces that are already there. And on the same fashion, EDI purchase UBL OCA is there to deal with purchase, so it's able to process and to send out, process not yet, but send out and generate and send out UBL files. Out of the core, I did a lot of improvements in sale order import, which is probably, if you deal with sales in the EDI, that's one of the most used modules. Thanks, Alexi. But it contains some bugs, so it has been refactored and improved and fixed. So if you have any feedback on that, I'm eager to hear that. And then to unify the way we handle PDFs, I moved out of the base EDI modules, the PDF management. So if you want to store XML inside the PDF, or you want to generate or read the PDF, you can use that module. I'm in line with the time, right? 5 minutes, yeah. All right, it's finished. I mean, the roadmap is there. So, the roadmap, finally. I would like to finish the purchase UBL integration. As I said, the process is not done yet. As well as the sale, we're going to implement a full UBL flow, so order response, and all the updates of the order. Then EDI exchange type auto is actually a new module that I made to automate the generation of the exchanges. So it allows you to configure on the models, on the exchange types, when and how and why you want to generate an exchange record automatically. So imagine you confirm an order and it generates a file. but only if it's, I don't know, assigned to the partner X. And I still have to finish this part and maybe make it easier to configure. I'd like to propose to move the core of the framework to EDI framework. I still have to send the email, but please approve it. Because I'd like to differentiate between what is in the core of the framework and what not. Then, of course, write some docs to make my talks useless, finally. Originally, I started the project working with GS1, and it's kind of been left there on version 13. Francois from Axon did something, but still not merged, so it would be nice if we can merge that. And then, non-related to the framework, we have plenty of EDI modules that do things, and during the years, Odoo added some more machinery to handle with processing or generating files or exchanges, so we should probably try to clean it up and reduce the code base that we have to maintain. The reference, you know, is OCA/EDI. Thanks for listening, and now for the questions. Minus your 5 minutes that you stole me. Yes.
I don't know if there is a dashboard to see a process job. And,
well, you see the exchange records. The jobs are on the...
I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
I've never used it, but I used to manage import legacy systems where mainly to import files from FTP, for instance. And we had a case where we need to, well, the FTP was not there, or the file was not there the day before.
Mm-hmm.
So we imported it one day later.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to manage that as it was imported the day before. So first we need to see that the job will not import the file and run it as it runs the day before.
Well, if it fails, it's going to show you the error on the exchange record. And then you know there is something failing, and you're going to check the job, and there you see the reason why, well, the traceback, if you had a traceback, of course. So normally when you have an error, being a validation error or a read or send error, you go on the record and you see the reason, and it's classified as failed. So you notice that normally. Anyone else? I was crystal clear. Great. Okay. Thanks for helping me.
The configuration rule, well, do you give the configuration to the customers if there are some Odoo administrators?
Yes. Well, if they are advanced, yes. Well, I mean, in any case, these are really kind of low technical configuration, so low level configuration. So you need someone that understands what he's doing, of course. But yeah, it's everything feasible from the UI. Yeah. No. Is that good? Driver, are we good?
Yeah, good.
Okay, then I switched to the other one.
You want me to add something?
I don't know. Maybe just thanks to Camp2Camp Initals for sponsoring, and that's it. Thanks.